Okay, good evening to everyone live and online. Um, just for those who haven't managed, I should have said this before we start. Actually, it would be useful to have a copy of Megillas Rus and also access to a chumash, since we're going to be looking at quite a lot of the themes. I labelled this series, I can't remember the exact title I gave it, but something about transition, and I'm going to argue that Megillas Rus is an exploration of the concept of transition on lots of levels. But before we do that, I just want to start with really the most basic question on Megillas Rus, which is what's it doing in Tanakh at all? And in the words of the Medrash, there is Megillas Rus at the back of the Chumash there. Yeah, the article of Chumash has at the back on page 1269 in the blue article of Chumash, and there's Megillas Rus. In the words of the Medrash in Rus Rabbah, it says Megillah zu ein balo tuma velo tara velo issa velo heta velo maniftava. It doesn't include any halachas. So why was it written? In other words, what's its purpose? I mean, the Medrash's question is a limited question. It's true that chunks of Tanakh include issa, veheta, tuma, and tara, but large chunks of Tanakh include narrative. And nonetheless, the Medrash seems to be worried what's the significance of this narrative. I think we all understand the narrative of Yetzias Mitzrayim, what its role is, and the narrative of Sefer Bereshis, as Rashi tells us, is Koyach Masav Higid L'Amari, is to teach us about the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his running of the world. And the narrative of Shoftim and Melachim, these deal with national issues at least. But the narrative of Rus is a story of one individual family's experiences, and the individual journey of Rus as a Giyores. What on earth is that doing in Nach? So that's the Medrash's question. And the Medrash answers, Zeira says to teach you about the schar for gomei chasodim. It's about the schar, the reward given to those who do chesed. So this is one midrashic answer to the question. What's the significance? That's really what this series is. This mini series is about. What's the point of Sefer Rus? What's it really about? And I'm going to argue, as I said, that it deals with big themes. But the Medrash has already addressed this question and said the theme of Rus is chesed. If you look in the psukim of Rus, the word chesed it appears many times. Rus, Naomi says to Rus, "Why are you accompanying me? Hashem should do chesed to you." The story of Rus is an act of chesed where she accompanies her mother-in-law back to Eretz Yisrael. It's a rejection of chesed, perhaps. Please go in. Take Chumash if you have Chumash. Just try and get. There aren't any there in the corner. Then just take from the book. The story of Rus opens with the rejection of chesed. When Elimelech runs away from Eretz Yisrael at the time of the famine. So chesed is a theme of Megillas Rus, and the sechar, the rewards you get for chesed, which is really also part of the story. If you look at the rise and fall of the characters in Rus, Rus rises because she does chesed. Boaz rises because he does chesed. Elimelech falls because he refuses to do chesed. Ploni Almoni falls because he refuses to do chesed. So that's one way of understanding the theme of Megillas Rus. That's one answer to the Medrash. The Zohar says a very different answer, which has become quite well known because it's quoted quite widely. And the Zohar says the importance of Megillas Rus is because it's to do with the ancestry of David HaMelech. This is the yichus of David HaMelech. Who could be more important than David, both in terms of his own significance as one of the first kings of Klal Yisrael, and in his role as the Malchus, as the ancestor of Melech HaMashiach. We know there's serious question marks about the ancestry of David. On one side, he descends from the story of Yehuda and Tamar, which is not such a simple moral story at all. On the other side, he descends from Rus, who not only is she a Giyores, she's not someone who's born into the Jewish people, but she's from Moav. She's a Moaviyah. So this is potentially a very problematic origin for David. And the message of Rus is, no, look where he really comes from. He comes from this amazing person, Rus, whose yichus, whose acceptance into Klal Yisrael is authorized by Naomi and then by Boaz and by his beis din. This is the yichus, this is the ancestry of Rus. So you have two very contrasting themes to Rus. Is it a very personal sort of relationshipal Megillah about chesed, or is it dealing with big national themes about kingship and nationality, and the forming of the nation, and ultimately rulership and Mashiach. How do these two go together? How do these two go together? Are these the same theme, or these different themes? Are they somehow interconnected? So that's the Hakdama, that's the introduction. What is the purpose of Rus? Why is it in Nach at all? It's a nice pastoral story of a family that have ups and downs. These things happen the whole time. Why is this a book in Tanakh? Chazal give at least two answers to the question, but we need to understand what their answers exactly mean, and if these answers interlink in any way. Let's try and step back and see what else we can say. I want to make sure also, before I go any further, that I give this shir b'shem Omru. So I was preparing in my own learning quite significantly to try and understand Megillas Rus. And 2 weeks ago, Shabbos, a week and a half ago only, Shabbos after Pesach, I went away to Brighton. We got a long weekend there. And there I discovered a wonderful book on Megillas Rus. I was interested in Megillas Rus because I was preparing it. And I discovered that he dealt with many of the themes that I wanted to address. So I ordered it with the wonders of Amazon and paid a bit extra so it would arrive swiftly. And by the time I came back to London from my break, it had already on my doorstep. And I've gone through a chunk of it. And I'm no longer sure what part of what I'm saying was for myself and what part is from him and so on. So I want to make clear that a very significant part of what I'm saying is from a man who I know nothing about, called Rabbi Moshe Miller. And he has a book on Megillas Rus, which I found very interesting. What I'm saying is not identical to what he says, but there's definitely a significant overlap. And if you want to explore some of these ideas in slightly different ways, but overlapping ways, then you can have a look at his book. I don't know much about him. I don't know what else he's written. I tried to Google him and couldn't find out too much. But so I just want to make sure that I make sure everything I say is Omer B'Dav V'Shem Amru. Now, the claim I've made is that Megillas Rus is about transition. And I think it's very significantly about transition. And to understand that, we need to contextualize historically where Megillas Rus lies. And here we turn to the very first pasuk in Megillas Rus, page 1269 for those who are using the art scroll Tamashim. Vayhi b'mei shafot hashoftim. Very unusual turn of phrase. We'll look at that turn of phrase in a few minutes. But the book is very clearly set in the era of the shoftim. What is the era of the Shoftim? Let's try and contextualize this period in history. So the Jewish people leave Egypt. They wander for 40 years in the Midbar. They get the Torah. They enter Eretz Yisrael under the leadership of Yehoshua. With the death of Yeshua, there's a range of Jewish leaders for some 300 years. And until the transition to Malchus, to kingship, and first King Shaul, who's not so successful, and the second King David HaMelech, who establishes the permanent dynasty of the royal family of the Jewish people. The era of the Shoftim starts roughly the year 2500, and the era of the Shoftim ends roughly in the year 2882. So we're looking at 380 rough years. 2882 since the creation of the world is the anointment of Shaul HaMelech, and 2500 is the death of Yeshua. That's roughly the period of time that we're talking about. Now, the transition between the era of the Shoftim and the rise of kingship is associated with the figure of Shmuel Hanavi. In some respect, he acts as the last of the Shoftim. Who are the Shoftim? The famous names of the Shoftim: Yiftach and Gilad and Devorah and Shimshon and Boaz, who features, of course, in the Megillah. We don't see him listed in Sefer Shoftim. The Gemara in Baba Basra says that he's the same as Ibzan, the same as Ibzan. He's one of the Shoftim who's mentioned in the Sefer Shoftim. Most of the Shoftim we know very little about. There's lengthy stories about some of them, Shimshon and Devorah and so on, and others about which we're just told they judged people and then they died and their successor took place. The era of the Shoftim concludes with Shmuel, who in some respects is the last of the Shoftim. He rules the Jewish people as a leader without being a king. And he is the figure whom the Jewish people approach and say, we want a king like other nations have, and who is appointed by Hashem to coronate the kings. He first appoints Shaul, then after the story with Amalek, he tells Shaul that he is going to lose the kingship, and then he appoints David HaMelech. So the transition between the two is the figure of Shmuel. And the Gemara in Baba Basra indeed tells us that Shmuel wrote 3 Seforim. He wrote Sefer Shoftim, in which he looks back on the history of the roughly 350 years that preceded him. In other words, from the death of Yeshua through to his emergence as the last of the Shoftim. That's Sefer Shoftim. He wrote Sefer Shmuel, which is the story of his life and his role in ushering in the era of the kings. He dies, and after that, Sefer Malachim, which, as per its name, is the story of the kings, takes over. It's now the story of the kings. So he wrote Sefer Shoftim and he wrote Sefer Shmuel. And then the same Gemara in Baba Basra says that he wrote Sefer Rus. Why did you write Sefer Rus? Because it's a story that takes place sometime in the era of the Shoftim. We don't know exactly where to identify it as in the as within which era it exists, where exactly in the time of the Shoftim. We don't even know by Hebrew Shoftim who these Shoftim are. The Medrash makes a number of attempts to try and work out: is it Barak and Devorah? Is it Shamgar and Ehud? There's Boyaz there, which the Gemara tells us is son, so maybe we can tie it into that. But it's a story located in the time of the Shoftim. Interestingly, in a sense, it's the story that links these two periods together, because the very first words of the Sefer are Vayhi b'mei shafot hashoftim, and the very last words of the Sefer are V'over todet es Yishai, V'Yishai todet es David. It's the ancestry of David. So it spans in Shmuel writing it, and we can understand perhaps why Shmuel wrote it. Remember the explanation that this is about the Yichus of David, and Shmuel has a task of bringing the Malchus of David into existence. So Shmuel writes about this transition, but Rus encapsulates in it this very transition from Shoftim to Malchus. That's what the book is. That's this work of Shmuel in writing it. So this is one sort of transition that takes place, and we're going to come back to this transition in much greater depth in a few moments. But I want to argue that there's many other transitions that take place. It's the story of a family moving from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz and Chutz La'aretz back. So it fits with the journey stories of Tanakh. Many stories in Tanakh about journeys. It's a very interesting thing. Our foundation as a people starts with the journey. Which journey? The journey of Lech Lecha, of Avraham going on a journey. Yaakov goes on a journey. Yitzchak even goes on a smaller journey. What triggers Yitzchak's journey? Which journey does Yitzchak undergo? A small journey, just from Eretz Yisrael to Pelishtim and back, triggered by famine, by the famine, right? By Yirav Ba'aretz, which, by the way, is also our story. We'll get back to that later. Their journey. So it's a story of a journey. It's a story of transition from leadership into not just failure of leadership, but powerlessness. The story opens with Elimelech as the leader of the Jewish people and continues very swiftly with Naomi returning back from Moab with abject poverty. It's the story of leadership and abdication of leadership responsibility. Elimelech, a famine breaks out, and Elimelech leads the Jewish people and deserts them. So it's a story that's dealing with themes of leadership and failed leadership. It's the story of an outsider coming back in and becoming a leader. Rus, the sort of paradigm of an outsider. She's Rus Hagiores. She's someone who's not from the Jewish people, but she's not even from a group that can fully become part of the Jewish people in some shape or form. She's a Moavia, and yet she ends up as the mother of Eima Malchus, as the queen mother, as the mother of kingship. So you've got a transition there. You've got the societal transition of Shofet to Melech, which we've spoken about. You've got Golus to Geula emerging. You've got the transition of ownership and redemption of ownership. Elimelech loses his property, and Boaz engages in Geula, in restoring the property to the family. You've got the transition from life to death, the death of Elimelech and his family, and interestingly, the transition of death to life. One of the big themes of the Megillah that we're going to look at is the concept of Yibum. Now, Yibum is a mitzvah in the Torah, it's a very mysterious mitzvah. It's the idea that somehow if someone dies without leaving continuity, childless, somehow their line can be continued to a relative stepping in and restoring the family, which is the concept of Yibum, of the widow marrying someone, and somehow the line is carried on. And there's also a very important theme in Rus of Rus's attempt to bring back to life the family of Elimelech. So you have these themes emerging, and we're going to revisit them again and again and again, and try and draw them out in greater depth. For now, though, I want to look at the transition of Shoftim to Melochim, which is the journey that Megillas Rus takes us on. And I'll pause for thought, actually, sorry, because I've said quite a lot already. These are the headlines, but we'll look at them in more detail, and then we'll explore in more depth this transition from Shoftim. Is this all okay? Any? You're looking. You're okay. Okay. So this is the headlines of some things I hope we'll get a chance to look at. Let's try and unpick the first of these, and I hope then over the next few weeks we'll unpick more of them. So what is the transition from Shoftim to Melochim? And anyone who has learned Sefer Shoftim knows that there's a refrain that runs throughout Sefer Shoftim. Vayomim haim ein melech b'Yisrael, or vayihi, vayomim haim or melech ein b'Yisrael. It's a period where there is no king. Ish hayashar be'enov ya'aseh. Each person does that which is yashar, that which is straight in their eyes. And when you read Shoftim, it's a book of chaos and lawlessness. There's external lawlessness and chaos because the Jewish people are under constant attack from the Pelishtim. And part of the problem is that they don't respond in a unified way. And therefore, the message of Sefer Shoftim is Ein Melech b'Yisrael. There's no king to bring them together in a national identity. You see them functioning as tribes. That's one of the themes of Sefer Shoftim, to a degree that when one tribe is attacked, it's not obvious that other tribes should come to their defense. There isn't a complete sense of national identity in Sefer Shoftim, and they're sort of fragmented, and that's part of the reason why they can't deal with the threat of the Pelishtim. And there's also internal chaos in which horrible things take place, and there's no king to really restore a sense of lawfulness. And the concluding story of Sefer Shoftim, which either took place right at the end of the era of Sefer Shoftim, or is positioned by Shmuel at the end of Sefer Shoftim as a sort of summary of everything that's wrong with Shoftim and why there's a need for kings, is a shocking story, which I want us to think about for a few moments. So just to summarize what we're doing now so that we're not lost, we're arguing that Rus is a book of transition. It's got many, many enormous changes that take place. Naomi says this later on herself. She comes back and everyone is horrified. This haggard, wasted, drawn, impoverished figure that comes up. How Zos Naomi? Is this Naomi? How can this be? And she says, I left full and I've come back empty. That there's so much in the Megillah around this idea of Rus, around this idea of massive transition. And that's a general overarching theme. And we're now looking at one of the most significant transitions in Jewish history, which affects us to this day, because to this day we live in a sort of post-Davidic world, in a world of where Esemach David of the Chameres, where we still long for Mashiach ben David. So we live in a world in which we very much see ourselves as a kingdom, as a malchus, as a people who are unified, but longing for our Melech, for David's family to come back. And that transition takes place here in Megillas Rus, which consciously is written by Shmuel to reinforce the needs for a Melech, and explicitly takes us on this transition from Vayihi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim through to the foundation of Malchus. And one way of thinking about this transition is the argument that Shmuel is making by writing Sefer Shoftim, that if you don't have a Melech, you have chaos and lawlessness, and a Melech is needed to bring order to society. And Shmuel ends Sefer Shoftim with a horrific story, a terrible story, and a story which gives another connection to what's going on in Rus and the link to Moav. And the story he tells is the story of Pelegesh Begiva. The outline of the story is that a man from Levi is wandering home from Beis Lechem. By the way, Beis Lechem is a very significant location. The story starts off by Yedach Ishmi Beis Lechem in Rus. Beis Lechem, of course, is the place where David HaMelech is born. And this Levi is coming home from Beit Lechem. And on the way, night falls and he has to stop somewhere. And he stops in a town called Givar in the Shevet Binyamin. And he seeks hospitality. And no one will let him in. No one will look after him. Reminds you of anywhere? Sodom. Okay, sounds like Sodom. But the parallel carries on in an uncanny way. Finally, someone lets him in, and the townspeople form a mob to surround this house. This is Jewish. These are Jews. This is Binyamin, and they surround the house and they bathe for the blood of this guest. Reminds you of anything? Sodom, exactly parallel story. It carries on. The householder negotiates for their lives, as does Lot, and the negotiation is the most horrific and vile negotiation possible. As Lot suggests his daughters, I'll give up my daughters to you, the people of Sodom, to abuse, and we'll buy our safety with that. The host offers up the Pelegesh, the concubine of his guest, as a way of saving their life. And the story is horrible. She's abused, she's murdered. It's a most horrific story, deliberately, explicitly paralleling the story of Sodom. And the Pesukim begin the story and end the story with Ishayoshem Einov, Ein Melech B'Yisrael, there's no king in Israel. This is what happens when you don't have government and you don't have proper force. The story then gets even worse, and at least there's a sense of horror at this story. And 11 tribes attack Binyamin, and there's a civil war. And Binyamin is almost wiped out. So you have a horrible situation of civil war, which again is this failure of national identity in a way when something goes wrong. Binyamin all cluster around supporting their folk in this town. They could have turned against their own town people, but they don't. The whole nation sees this as about Binyamin, and Binyamin gets attacked. They even make a chiyum against marrying anyone from Binyamin, until they realize that Binyamin is heading towards extinction, and they need Binyamin to survive. Why do they need Binyamin to survive? The Medrash says because Binyamin is going to be from Binyamin is going to come the first king of the Jewish people, Shaul HaMelech, who precedes David. So there's an interesting sort of tie-in. It's tie-in in that. So what we have here is a claim that without a Melech, Klal Yisrael begins behaving like Sodom. That's the concluding chapters of Sefer Shoftim. And Rus now opens with someone running away from Eretz Yisrael because they don't want to do chesed. A famine breaks out in the land of Israel. And Elimelech doesn't want to take responsibility for dealing with this famine and for sharing his wealth and for allocating resources and doing what leaders have to do in tough times. And he runs away to where of all places? He runs away to Moav. Who is Moav? Moav is the daughter of the grandson of Lot, right? Again, the post-Sodom story, that Lot runs away from Sodom and fathers two children who become Moav. By the way, what is Moav famous for? Why is Moav not allowed? Why are we not allowed to marry into Moav? Again, Sefer Devarim. They didn't show us hospitality as we emerged from Mitzrayim. So we're going through the Midbar, and Moav doesn't step forward to help us. Interestingly, we're now already arriving at a overlap, in a sense, between these two themes of the Midrashim about why we read Rus, because Megillas Rus is about establishing the yichus of David and the need for malchus, and it's about chesed and the rewards of kindness. And the trigger for Klal Yisrael realizing that the Shoftim project has failed and we need a melech is the complete breakdown into Sodom-like culture that emerges when you don't have any structure to society. Basically, everyone for themselves. That's the theme of Shoftim. Might is right. Fend for yourself. Don't think bigger. Don't transcend. Don't think about your people on a national level and beyond. Just think about your own immediate needs. Sodom's ideology is not so horrific. It's the Mishnah in Ova says, what's the ideology of Sodom? Shali, shali, v'shalach, shalach. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. So it's just fend for yourself. In a way, it's a reasonable ideology, but it leads to the most terrible consequences. And the message of Shoftim is this is what happens. So we're already seeing like an intertwining between the theme of Chesed or Sefer Rus and the emergence of Malchus, which seems to be part of what Shmuel is saying. Yeah.
You're saying that Shmuel deliberately, wrote, showed him, ended it up with this thing.
Yes.
Need a king.
Chazal understand that the story took place earlier, actually, even, and it's ein muktam u'mu'ucha b'Torah. He delivered the story at the end, or possibly it's historically in order, in which case it's literally the trigger of the next stage.
Maybe I'm wrong on this. That when you asked Shmuel for a king, he was a bit put out, a bit reluctant.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. The pasuk in Devarim says "Som tasim olach hamelech," and yet when Shmuel is asked to appoint a king, Shmuel indeed reacts with he's very critical of the Jewish people, and he says to them, "What's wrong with me? Why do you need a king?" And this is oft discussed in the Pasha in Sefer Devarim when we talk about the mitzvah to appoint a king. Is a king a good thing or a bad thing? Well, what do we think? Are there any disadvantages in having a king? Why did Klal Yisrael experiment with Shoftim first? Does Ish HaYosha Be'enov have to be bad? Or is it appealing?
Empirically, there were more better behaved role models in the Shoftim than there were in the Malachim. You can barely count on one hand the number of righteous kings, maybe one and a half. You could 6 push. Whereas as before, you mentioned a whole group of people, Gidon and Shimshon his own way, who were much better than most of the kings.
So you have the interesting thing is the Melech model doesn't work so well either, right? It also doesn't work so well. In a way, and I don't want to get too much into sort of modern political debate and so on, but in a way, you have the debate between a centralized authority, which has the advantage of avoiding the chaos of the era of the Shoftim, but can become overly centralized. And there's something quite nice about the decentralized nature. And then when it goes wrong, it can be awfully wrong. There's something quite nice about the decentralized nature of Shoftim. I remember as a child learning Shoftim and never being clear if Ish HaYosher B'enov was meant as a bad thing or a good thing. Ish HaYosher B'enov actually sounds quite appealing. Everyone's doing that, which is Yashar, straight in their eyes. I mean, what would be wrong with that? And in a way, this brings out the point, which is Ish HaYosher B'enov is very good personal righteousness, but you're not thinking bigger. And Ish HaYosher B'enov lends itself to each person doing that which they see right. Well, we all know when we use our own judgment for right, sometimes we get it right, and sometimes bias sways us and colors our judgment, and what we think is right isn't right. When you have an authority over you, the advantage of authority is hopefully it can offer some form of neutral structure to run things in a way that's thinking what's good for everyone and what really works, rather than just what's individually good for me. So Ish HaYosher B'enov can be very nice. It can be each person doing what they're doing out of a lishma, an idealistic desire to do right, rather than just because this is what the government says you should do. But on the other hand, it can lead to chaos, and it's very dangerous. The Mishnah Ovis already says that we should daven for the Shlomo Malchus, because without the Malchus, without the kingdom, and this is the basis of our davening to this day for the thing, without each person swallows alive their fellow. We literally end up as cannibals, either literally eating each other's flesh or metaphorically eating each other's flesh. Yeah.
The worst level Levine during that time constructed there was spiritual leadership.
The interesting thing is that I wasn't going to go into this, but it's a fair point. One of the disadvantages of the Shoftim, as opposed to the kings, is there isn't a division of power between the spiritual and political leadership. So the Shofet is both the spiritual and temporal leader of the Jewish people. In some ways, even Moshe Rabbeinu is that model. He's the Novi and the leader. It's very interesting because we very rarely step back and think about Jewish history or Nach even with a sweeping look. But we sort of take for granted that Moshe is the primary Novi and also the leader of the Jewish people, and Yeshua is that. Then there's this interregnum of the Shoftim when we don't see that many Nevi'im explicitly, and they seem, some of them are explicitly Nevi'ah. Devorah is a Nevi'ah. Shimshon, I think I gave a show when we were looking at Haftorah. I think we discussed Shimshon at length. There's this pasuk of V'tamen Ruach Hashem B'kirbo. The Ruach of Hashem beated like a bell inside him, but he's not exactly a Novi. Shmuel, the last in a way of the Shoftim, is explicitly a Novi. He's Shmuel HaNovi, but and he's a leader. And it's only once you have a king that we get the theme that's familiar to us through the rest of Tanakh, in which there's a division of labor between the Novi and the Melech, and sometimes tension between them, but they provide this balancing act. You'll often hear said that the division of power is a Jewish innovation, right? This American idea of do they call it division of power, separation of power? Not really separation of church and state here, but the balance act that you've got the three, yeah. But it didn't come immediately to Klal Yisrael in a way. And with Moshe, you don't really have that division of power. It's by the ends of the system, you have a Melech who is executive, you have the Sanhedrin who are interpretation of Torah, you have the Novi and so on, and you have this. The king is very separate from the legislative body. So that's the journey that go place. And your point, Benji, is right. It's not clear cut that this is automatically and obviously for the good, but it definitely gets rid of the chaos. And part of the message of the mission and others is, in some ways, even a bad government is better than no government, because otherwise, if you have nothing, you've got chaos. Everyone fends for themselves. We end up as cannibals. You end up with Sodom, with its seemingly harmless ideology of shali shali v'shalach shalach, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. It doesn't seem disastrous, and yet it ends thing. Whereas a king, at least there's a possibility of a structure. The Rambam, by the way, in Hilchos Melachim, explicitly when he speaks, the Hilchos Melachim is a section where he deals with the laws of kings. Explicitly almost defines a king as being the role of a king is to unify and give a sense of direction and a sense of identity and a sense of purpose to the people. That's what a king is meant to do. So interesting, and we live now in a constitutional monarchy, but it's still true that whilst the monarch has no power to legislate or anything really, they encapsulate and somehow represent the concept of what the country is in a person. And the Rambam says explicitly that's the core of what a king is. So the Rambam, for those who want to look up, in Perik Gimel Halacha Vav, and the Rambam has listed all the stringencies or chumras that apply to a king that don't apply to civilians. So a regular civilian has far less halachas than the king. The king has halacha of lo yabel enoshim, not marrying too many people. He's not allowed to he's not allowed to ever get drunk. Now, getting drunk is not the most noble behavior, but it's not an issa in the Torah on a civilian. Lo yabel kasef, he's not allowed to accumulate wealth. Anyone else is allowed to accumulate wealth. You become fantastically wealthy. Good luck to you. The king is not allowed to accumulate wealth. The king has to walk around with a Sefer Torah bound to his arm the whole time, like it's tefillin. There was a small Sefer Torah and it's bound to his arm the whole time. So the Rambam finishes all of this and it says, Al hasoras liboy hikbid Torah. The Torah was makbid, was particular about the veering of the heart of the king. It's a pasuk in Devarim, that his heart shouldn't veer. Why? Sheliboy, there's a very famous phrase of the Rambam, Sheliboy huleiv kol Klal Yisrael, because his heart is the heart of the whole Jewish people. So this is where he defines what a king is. The reason, if a regular person veers off, one person is veered off. If the king veers off, it's the lave of Yisrael that's veering off. So it's the heart of the whole Jewish people that's veering off. There's something. The king is the beating heart of the people who provides them a national identity, and that's the danger of a king, but also the importance and centrality of a king in providing this sort of identity. Yes.
Just clarifying, you're basically saying that Rut is part of Shoftim.
Yes.
It's written by Shmuel Rut.
Yes.
And Shmuel, although the bigger theme stuff, none of that is actually explicit in Rut. Is this loose representation? No, that's too much context. And then he kind of just puts at the end the last 2%.
Yes.
So he's written that already after David become king, presumably.
Or David, at least his rising his power is becoming prominent. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's just bound the story, but in fact, the story itself, almost none of the themes that you're referring to, it's more sort of rules.
Yes, yes. And the punchline of the argument is going to be that if you want to build nation and you want kingship and you want a flourishing monarchy and you want this national identity to form, the place to start is in home and personal and individual and chesed. And that's Shmuel's argument. Shoftim has fallen apart because there's an extreme breakdown in Hachnos Zarchim. It's just Hachnos Zarchim. I mean, it's just welcome guests. How big a deal is it? Why couldn't you have a functioning society that doesn't do Hachnos Zarchim? You know, everything else can work perfectly well. And Shoftim says not like that. Shoftim is an exceptional breakdown in family values and family morals. Interestingly, both in Sodom and in the story of Shoftim, the same thing happens, which is there's an immediate transition from if these are strangers, then they've got no rights whatsoever, and they should be vulnerable in the most horrible and abusive way. So a society which can't welcome guests ends up not being able to even give the most basic sanctity of home and family, also falls apart. And the argument that I'm making over here, now the presentation we're making of Sefer Rus, is that this sweet pastoral story of a leader who abdicates responsibility and runs away when famine breaks out, and the ability of Rus to embody restoring family is what Shmuel is arguing is what's necessary in order to build monarchy. You can only build a society if you start from home and build up from there. That's the message. In a sense, I've now said everything I'm going to say in the next few weeks, and maybe we don't need a mini series even on this. But that's the sort of punchline of what I'm suggesting. Yes.
Is that why? So the other mirror of the Megillah is probably Revi of Vayesha, where you have I think the only two long descriptions of Yibum in.
Yes.
Tanakh.
Yes.
And the first one. So on our level, as we would say, is Yibum done badly, whereas this is Yibum done.
Okay.
Badly,
Very, very nice. Okay. So I was asked to repeat questions when they're asked. So the question I just answered beforehand, Neil's question, was, okay, Dayan, very nice. You're arguing that the book is this transition, this massive theme of transition from Shoftim to Melachim. But when you read the story, it doesn't say any of that. And it says two pasukim worth on that. It says the first pasuk and the last pasuk. Chazal drew out of that Shmuel is the author of this book. We're retracing Chazal's thinking in that. And I'm arguing that these two pasukim, which are the brackets that frame the whole story, of on the one side, Ve'hi b'mei shafot ha'shoftim, and on the other side, V'yishah David, it's somehow Shmuel is arguing that the whole story, this sweet, nice story about families, is going between the two. So that was an answer to Neil's question. Benji now is asking about Yibum. We will look at Yibum in detail. Yibum, which is a very, very difficult halacha to understand, and there's mysterious elements to it, which we're not going to touch upon. But one aspect of Yibum is chesed shalames, is kindness to a dead person and trying to restore family life. Again, I'm just giving away the punchline of the story. Chesed shalames is going to feature very, very strongly in the story of Rus, and we'll see how that's mefurish, explicit in the psukim, that Rus embarks on a project of kindness to those who have died. That's what she does. We refer to kindness to those who have died as chesed shalames, kindness of truth. The only true kindness is kindness to those who have died. We need to understand why that is in a deep way. And Yibum is restoring a ruptured family. So it's whether we understand it or not, it's a very, very powerful mitzvah. Restoring a ruptured family, and again tying it back into the theme of kingship. The origins of kingship on two sides are linked to the Yibum story. The only two episodes we have of Yibum being described at length in the Torah, in Tanakh, are, as Benji very correctly said, are the story of Yehuda and Tamar, and that whole episode there, which gives birth to Yehuda's children and the ancestry of Moshiach, which features in the penultimate psukim. Ve'ela told us Peret. Who is Peret? Peret is the child born of Yehuda's act of Yibum, whether it's Yibum done well or not, who knows? And that's on one side. And in a sense, on the other side, you have the Rus Boaz Yibum story. So again, the same idea really from another angle. What I'm trying to argue is from every angle we look at this, we see the same message coming through, which is restoring family, restoring home. Doing chesed, that's how the Malchus is built. And that's how you make this massive, big national transition from Shoftim to Melachim. So I guess really to summarize what we're really arguing is that we can talk about big political themes. These are massive political themes that we've touched on here. What is the nature of society? Is some sort of very extreme, I'm not to give it overly modern terms, but is some extreme free market, liberal, everyone fend for yourself, culture, the better one, is Shayashav Einov that comes with pros and cons. It's not simple to answer. Or is a strong central government better? these are really big themes and they're sweeping historic questions as Klal Yisrael makes the transition from Shoftim to Melachim. And on the other hand, you have this sweet story seemingly dealing with family falling apart and then being restored through Yibum. And yet, textually, the deliberately woven into these stories are linking into the bigger themes. Beis Lechem, travels because of famines, Moav, going to Moav of all places, Sodom. So you've got sort of woven into that the stories in the same way as the Torah weaves in a parallel between the story of Sodom and the terrible story of Plagesh Megillah and the breakdown of the era of the Shoftim into this terrible chaos. So that's sort of the big picture summary. I want today to just shift to we'll just use the last few minutes just to do a few minutes worth of my aim, by the way, is going to be to finish around about this series to do about 45 minutes only, because I've got various commitments on through the next few weeks after that. So this will be a 45-minute series. But I just want to do a few psukim just so we can move from the sort of big picture look. First pasuk, Vayihi b'mei shefot hashoftim. Very famous words, and the comment of Chazal is on these words are very famous. Vayihi b'mei shefot hashoftim is a hard phrase to translate, and it was in the days when the judges judged. It's a little unclear. It's vague. We don't know which shoftim we're talking about. We discussed that already. Chazal understands it as Vayihi b'mei shefot hashoftim, and it was in the days of the judging of the judges. That people were very critical of the judges. It wasn't a time of where people just accepted it. This is Chazal. They say that when a judge issued a decree, people turned to the judge and said, "Who are you? You're corrupt yourself. Your judgments are dishonest." They didn't accept authority. Again, ties back to the Ishayash of Shoftim and the fact that there isn't a strong leadership. By the way, if we want another parallel over here, what position did Lot assume around the time of the story of Sodom? Lot had just become a judge. I said to bring Chumash along because I wanted us to look at all these psukim inside, but in the interest of time, we're not going to. But the homework there is, Lot is sitting b'shar ira at the gate of his city. I don't understand that to mean he's just been appointed as a judge, and the people are surrounding his house again, and they're saying, "You're not fit to be a judge of Sodom." So this is the first comment of Chazal. That is the time when the judge is judged. It's not just a historical setting, but it's also a sort of cultural setting or psychological setting. Let's just try and finish this pasuk there. At least that can be our goal for today. There was a famine in the land, and someone there's so many themes in these psukim. I'll just try and, in one pasuk, just try and draw out some of them. A man went from Beis Lechem Yehuda, Lagor b'stei Moav, to live in the fields of Moav, Huve Ishtoi or Shnei Vanov. In fact, I've done enough hard work today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to do the rest of the hard work for a few minutes. To help me unpick this pasuk. What ideas occur to you textually? Is this a well-constructed sentence? Do you like this pasuk? Pastoral, of course we like this pasuk. But is it a well-constructed sentence? Do we think it's phrased well?
The person told at the end of the year, a family.
Mm-hmm.
Then someone jumps and the man leaves. You don't know who it is going to the base there.
Yes, so there's a lot missing. He's referred to as Ish, a man goes from Beis Lechem. Who is he? Who is this man? How do we know who he is? Well, pasuk Beis, v'shema Ish ani melech, v'shem Ish army. Does this ring a bell from any other structure that you're aware of, where stories are told about anonymouses? Yeah, your family. Yeah, right. Your great-great-grandfather, I believe, yes? Vayelech Ish Beis Levi. Someone goes from Beis Levi, and he takes a bus Levi, a daughter from Levi. No idea who they're nameless, they're anonymous. Why are they nameless and anonymous there? Nothing's happened. They're persecuted. They don't deserve names. They don't have names. Very interesting construction. A nameless person goes, And in the next pasuk, we're told the name of the person. None of us nowadays would write it like that, right? We would say there was someone called Elimelech and Naomi, and then they did the following thing. Okay, so that's one textual thing, the namelessness. What other textual problems do we have over here?
Doesn't really finish its beginning about the fact that there was a famine in the land, or what was going on in the land.
It doesn't tell us Elimelech's motive and what's really going on. There's something else disjointed in the pasuk. Who leaves in the first half of the pasuk? Who leaves? Vayelech, he goes, singular. Ish, a man leaves. In the second half of the pasuk, who leaves? He, his wife, and his children, 2 sons. Okay, what do we think their relationship is like? Who's really leaving over here? Why would it be constructed like that? Who's the boss in the family? He's the instigator. He's the boss, right? He's the boss. They're following, right? And the Medrash picks up on this, by the way. That they're honors. They're forced to leave by him. He's the commanding figure in the family. He decides they leave. In halacha, by the way, is that correct? The husband and wife in the halachas of relationships, and a husband and wife did yes. So the halacha is actually not for leaving any country. If a couple get married and they haven't said we're going to, set up home in France, they get married in England, then they're stuck in England unless they both agree. Neither can force the other one to leave from country to country, with the exception of making aliyah, of moving to Eretz Yisrael, which is more complicated, but not moving from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. You can move if a couple set up home and the area becomes depopulated of Jews, it ends up not being a Jewish area, and therefore you can't live a full Jewish life. Either one can force their spouse to move to a Jewish area. They set up home in Chutz La'aretz, they can force to move to Eretz Yisrael, but nothing else. Here you have exactly the opposite, right? They're moving from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, they're moving from a Jewish area to a non-Jewish area, and Elimelech, we're going to find out his name next pasuk, is the one that's deciding this and forcing the others to go with him. So it's very, very clear in the language of the pasuk what their relationship is. I'll just finish off that Chazal saw significance in name places. It's interesting, they leave at a time of famine. They leave Beis Lechem. It's interesting. And it's interesting that they go to Moav, who are the people Asher Loi, that didn't come out Belechem of a mime, didn't come out with bread. So there's a time of famine. They move from Beis Lechem, which is no longer providing them bread, to, it's probably called that, by the way, because it's a fertile part where there's bread, and they go to stay Moav. They're leaving because of a famine, a great theme in so much of Tanakh. Avraham arrives, Lech Lecha me'artzecha. He arrives in Eretz Yisrael, a famine vayirav ba'aretz. He has to go down to Egypt. Yitzchak has to go down to Pelishtim. Yaakov goes down to Mitzrayim. Why? Because of a famine. So famines and travels are interesting things. Next week, we run out of time now. Next week, we're going to explore this dynamic of leaving somewhere because of food. I think it should already open up in your minds questions about decision making and values and things like that. And we're also going to look at the role of the most basic role, perhaps, of a society, which is to provide security, 2 things, security and food to its inhabitants. That's the 2 basic roles of central government. That's a teaser for next week. But for now, I think we've at least touched upon some of the textual problems in Pasuk Aleph. And Mr. Shem will carry on next week. And wish everyone a good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.